out of our true environment. Why humans struggle spiritually when they forget where they belong. By David Russo. Chapter 1. Every living thing has an environment. Every living thing survives because it belongs somewhere. A fish belongs in water. A bird belongs in the air. A tree belongs in soil, sunlight, and rain. This is not philosophy. It is not metaphor. It is biology. Remove any living thing from the environment it was designed for, and no amount of effort, intelligence, or willpower will keep it alive. A fish cannot try harder to survive on land. A bird cannot outwork gravity without air beneath its wings. Life is sustained not by struggle, but by fit. And yet, when it comes to humans, we often forget this most basic truth. We understand environments when they are obvious. We know we need oxygen, water, food, and shelter. We design homes to protect us from cold and heat. We build systems to ensure survival. But we rarely ask a deeper question, one that quietly shapes every moment of our lives. What environment does the human soul require? Because humans are not only physical beings. We think, we feel, we imagine, we hope, we grieve, we long for meaning. We ache in ways that cannot be explained by hunger or exhaustion alone. And when these inner dimensions suffer, we don't usually assume we're in the wrong environment. We assume something is wrong with us. We call it weakness. We call it failure. We call it mental illness, lack of discipline, lack of faith, lack of motivation. But what if the problem is not internal defect? What if it is environmental mismatch? In nature, no creature is blamed for struggling outside its habitat. If a whale washes on ashore, we do not accuse it of negativity. We rush to return it to water. We understand instinctively that life collapses when its sustaining environment is removed. Yet humans experience anxiety, emptiness, burnout, and disconnection, and we treat these as personal flaws instead of warning signals. Signals that say, you are trying to live outside the atmosphere you were designed for. This book begins with a simple but unsettling premise. Every living thing has an environment, and the soul is no exception. The difficulty is that the soul's environment is not visible. You cannot point to it on a map. You cannot measure it with instruments. You cannot bottle it or sell it, which makes it easy to ignore. Air was once invisible to science, too. For most of human history, people breathed without understanding what they were breathing. They only noticed air when it was absent, when lungs burned, when breath shortened, when life slipped away. The soul works the same way. When its environment is present, we barely notice. There is a quiet sense of rightness, a groundedness, a natural peace beneath activity. But when it is absent, we feel it immediately, though we may not know what we're feeling. We sense restlessness without cause, pressure without clarity, a constant need to distract, achieve, or numb. We are surrounded by explanations for this discomfort, but very few questions that go deep enough. This book asks a different question than most self-help or spiritual writing. Not, how do I fix myself? But, where do I belong? Because belonging is an environmental question. A plant does not ask how to grow harder. It seeks light. An animal does not analyze its worth. It seeks safety and nourishment. Humans, however, have learned to override instinct. We push past signals. We normalize suffocation. We build identities around endurance in environments that slowly drain us. And we call this strength. But endurance is not the same as alignment. You can survive in the wrong environment for a long time, especially if you are adaptive, intelligent, and determined. But survival is not the same as thriving. And eventually, the cost becomes visible. This is not a religious argument, though it may touch what many call spiritual. It is not about adopting beliefs, doctrines, or systems. It is about recognizing a forgotten truth. Life flourishes where it fits. The chapters that follow will return to this truth again and again, from different angles, through different images. Fish and water, air and breath, technology and protection, modern life and invisible suffocation. But it all begins here, with the reminder that you are not broken for struggling. You may simply be breathing in the wrong environment. And before we can talk about tools, practices, or change, we must first restore something far more fundamental. The understanding that nothing alive thrives outside the place it was meant to live. Not even you. Chapter 2. The fish never doubts the water. A fish has never woken up wondering if water will support it. It does not question whether swimming is worth the effort. It does not analyze the chemistry of its surroundings. It does not pause to evaluate whether it deserves to breathe through its gills. The fish simply lives, not because it is unaware, but because it is aligned. Water holds the fish effortlessly. It carries its weight. It moves with it. Resistance and support exist together, and the fish does not interpret this as struggle. It interprets it as life. This is an important distinction. We often confuse effort with misalignment. But effort exists in every environment. A fish still swims upstream. A bird still beats its wings against wind. Life is not effortless, but it is supported when it exists where it belongs. Alignment does not remove challenge. It removes existential strain. The fish never doubts the medium that sustains it. There is no internal debate about whether water is real, reliable, or sufficient. Water is not something the fish believes in. It is something the fish trusts without thinking. Humans, however, live very differently. We question the invisible. We mistrust what we cannot control. We doubt what cannot be proven through force or certainty. And because the soul's environment is unseen, we treat it as optional. We tell ourselves we can thrive on willpower alone, on discipline, on constant movement, on external achievement. We replace alignment with effort and then wonder why we are exhausted. But effort without alignment always leads to fatigue. Imagine asking a fish to survive by flopping harder on land. Imagine encouraging it with motivational slogans. Imagine blaming it for not adapting fast enough. This is what many humans do to themselves. They live in emotional and spiritual environments that constrict them: fear, comparison, noise, urgency, and then attempt to overcome the damage through sheer persistence. When it doesn't work, they assume the problem is insufficient effort. But no amount of effort can substitute for the right environment. The fish does not strive to earn water. It does not fear losing water. It does not cling to water in panic. It trusts what holds it because it has never been separate from it. This trust is not intellectual. It is embodied. And this is where humans often get lost. We try to think our way into alignment. We analyze. We argue. We debate. We seek certainty before surrender. But alignment is not a conclusion. It is a condition. The fish doesn't know water as an idea. It knows water as an experience. Likewise, the soul does not survive on concepts alone. It survives on presence, connection, stillness, meaning, qualities that cannot be forced, only entered. When humans lose alignment with their inner environment, they compensate with control. They schedule every moment. They optimize every habit. They fill silence with noise. They keep moving to avoid the sensation of floating unsupported. But the irony is this: the more we try to control life, the less we trust what holds us. The fish never doubts the water because the water has never failed it. It has never demanded belief. It has never required proof. It simply is. What if the soul's environment works the same way? What if peace is not something to be achieved, but something to be trusted? What if support is already present, waiting for permission rather than effort? Alignment, in this sense, is not about doing more. It is about stopping the behaviors that pull us out of the water. Fear pulls us out. Ego pulls us out. Constant comparison pulls us out. Endless striving pulls us out. And when we feel the shock of that exposure, we don't recognize it as misalignment. We call it stress. We call it anxiety. We call it modern life. But the fish would call it suffocation. This chapter is not asking you to abandon responsibility or action. The fish still swims. The bird still flies. But their effort exists within an environment that supports them. The question is not whether you are trying hard enough. The question is whether you are trying to live without trusting the medium that sustains your soul. Because when alignment is restored, effort becomes fluid. Movement becomes natural. Life no longer feels like a constant argument with gravity. The fish never doubts the water, not because it is naive, but because it has never forgotten where it belongs. And neither did you. Not at first. Chapter 3: Humans and the Invisible Atmosphere. Air is one of the greatest miracles humans routinely forget. You cannot see it. You cannot hold it. You rarely think about it. And yet, every moment of your life depends on it. You breathe roughly 20,000 times a day without conscious effort. Your lungs expand. Oxygen enters. Carbon dioxide leaves. Life continues. You do not wake each morning wondering whether air will be available. You assume it. You trust it. You move through it as though it were nothing at all, until it's gone. Only in moments of smoke, altitude, suffocation, or illness do we suddenly remember the atmosphere. Only when breath becomes difficult do we realize how much has been quietly sustaining us all along. This is how humans treat their deepest needs. What is essential but invisible becomes neglected. What is loud and urgent replaces what is subtle and sustaining. Air does not demand attention. It does not compete. It does not announce its importance. It simply supports life, silently, constantly, faithfully. And because of that, it is easy to forget. The soul's environment works the same way. There is an inner atmosphere that supports emotional, psychological, and spiritual life. It is made of things that cannot be measured or monetized: presence, meaning, connection, stillness, compassion, truth. When these are present, life feels breathable. When they are absent, life feels tight, even if everything looks fine on the surface. But modern life trains us to focus only on what we can see. We measure productivity. We track performance. We optimize time, bodies, finances, and outcomes. Rarely do we ask, is my inner atmosphere breathable? Instead, we push through the tightness. We normalize it. We call it adulthood, responsibility, ambition. We accept shallow breathing as the cost of living. Yet no amount of success compensates for suffocation. A person can have comfort, status, and security and still feel like they're gasping. Not because something is wrong with them, but because something essential is missing. Just as the body cannot survive without oxygen, the soul cannot survive without its own sustaining elements. But unlike oxygen, these elements are not obvious. They don't trigger alarms until deprivation becomes severe. This is why so many people are shocked by burnout, shocked by collapse, shocked by a sudden loss of meaning. They did not realize they were living at emotional altitude. Humans are uniquely capable of surviving in unhealthy inner environments for long periods of time. We adapt. We numb. We distract. We compensate. We become functional while slowly forgetting what full breath feels like. And the more invisible the deprivation, the more we blame ourselves for the symptoms. We say we're ungrateful. We say we lack resilience. We say we should be able to handle this. But you wouldn't shame someone for struggling to breathe in thin air. You would bring them oxygen. You would change the environment. The problem is not that humans are weak. The problem is that we have mistaken invisibility for unimportance. Air proves that what sustains us most does not announce itself. The question is not whether you believe in the soul's atmosphere. You breathe without belief. The question is whether you are paying attention to the signs of deprivation: shortness of patience, restlessness and stillness, a constant need for stimulation, a quiet grief without a clear cause. These are not character flaws. They are signals, like the body's gasp when oxygen drops. This chapter invites a pause, not to fix anything, not to analyze yourself, but to notice. Notice how rarely you feel fully at ease. Notice how often your inner world feels crowded or noisy. Notice how long it has been since life felt spacious rather than pressured. Air surrounds you whether you acknowledge it or not, but awareness changes how you breathe. In the same way, remembering the soul's invisible atmosphere changes how you live, not by adding more effort, but by restoring what was always meant to be there. Because humans do not collapse from lack of strength. They collapse from forgetting what keeps them alive. Chapter 4. When humans enter other worlds. Humans are remarkably adaptable, but not careless. When we enter environments that cannot sustain us, we do not pretend otherwise. We prepare. We acknowledge the danger. We bring what we need to survive. A diver does not jump into the ocean and hope their lungs will adapt. They bring oxygen, a pressure-regulated tank, a mask, a suit. All of it is a quiet admission of truth. This world is not designed for my body. An astronaut does not argue with space. They do not demand resilience from their skin or discipline from their lungs. They wear a suit. They accept dependence. They respect reality. No one calls this weakness. We call it intelligence. Technology, in this sense, is not an attempt to dominate nature. It is an act of humility. It is the recognition that different environments require different forms of support. And yet, when it comes to emotional and spiritual environments, humans often abandon this wisdom. We enter high-pressure worlds, constant productivity, chronic uncertainty, digital noise, emotional volatility, and we expect our inner lives to adapt without support. We assume we should be able to handle it. We shame ourselves when we can't. But imagine sending an astronaut into space with no suit, and telling them to be stronger. This is how many people live. Modern life is not the natural environment of the human nervous system. It moves faster than our biology evolved for. It exposes us to more information, comparison, and threat than we were ever meant to process continuously. Yet we act as though our inner systems should remain unaffected. When stress shows up, we don't ask whether we're underprotected. We ask what's wrong with us. The diver doesn't blame their lungs for needing oxygen. The astronaut doesn't resent the suit. Support does not mean fragility. It means realism. Protective technology exists because humans respect environmental limits. We do not argue with water pressure. We do not negotiate with vacuum. We respond with preparation. But spiritually and emotionally, we've absorbed a dangerous myth that needing support means something is broken. So we go without. We move through demanding worlds without stillness. We absorb fear without grounding. We carry grief without space to process it. We face uncertainty without reflection or meaning. And then we wonder why we feel exposed. Spiritual tools, stillness, prayer, reflection, presence, compassion, are not escapes from reality. They are suits. They are tanks. They are life support systems for environments that would otherwise overwhelm us. They do not remove us from the world. They allow us to exist in it without suffocating. An astronaut can work, repair, and explore in space, but only because of the suit. Without it, space would be lethal. With it, space becomes navigable. The same is true of modern life. The problem is not that the world is demanding. The problem is pretending it isn't. When humans reject support, they call it independence. But true independence is not exposure. It is sustainability. We were never meant to be raw in every environment. Even the strongest structures require insulation. Even the most advanced machines need shielding. Even the most capable humans need boundaries between their inner world and external pressure. This chapter is not asking you to withdraw from life. It is asking you to stop confusing vulnerability with authenticity. There is nothing noble about spiritual exposure. There is nothing virtuous about emotional suffocation. Protection is not denial, it is wisdom. You would not ask your body to survive underwater without air. Do not ask your soul to survive in pressure without support. Technology taught us something ancient. Survival is not about toughness. It is about respecting where you are and learning how to breathe there. Chapter 5, Spiritual Suffocation. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix. You can rest your body for 8 hours and still wake up tired. You can take time off and feel no relief. You can slow your schedule and yet sense a pressure that never fully lifts. This is not physical fatigue. This is suffocation. Spiritual suffocation does not arrive dramatically. It rarely announces itself. It seeps in quietly, disguised as normal life. It shows up as anxiety without a clear cause. Emptiness that success does not fill. Burnout that feels deeper than workload. Disconnection even when surrounded by people. We treat these states as personal failures. We ask what we're doing wrong. We search for better habits. We push ourselves to be more grateful, more resilient, more positive. But no one tells someone short of breath to try harder at breathing. They change the air. Suffocation is not a lack of effort. It is a lack of oxygen. And the soul, like the body, has its own oxygen. When that oxygen is absent, symptoms appear. Not because something is broken, but because something essential is missing. Anxiety is often the soul's gasp for safety. Emptiness is the ache of disconnection. Burnout is what happens when meaning has thinned beyond what effort can compensate for. Numbness is the nervous system's final defense against prolonged deprivation. These are not random afflictions of modern life. They are signals. But we live in a culture that treats signals as inconveniences. We silence them with distraction. We override them with productivity. We medicate them without always asking what they are responding to. And sometimes medication is necessary. But medication alone does not answer an environmental problem. A person in a smoke-filled room may need treatment, but they also need clean air. Spiritual suffocation often occurs in plain sight. It happens to people who are functioning, who are successful, who appear composed, who have learned to survive on shallow breaths. Over time, shallow breathing becomes normal. The absence of fullness feels ordinary. Until one day, something breaks. A panic attack, a collapse of motivation, a sudden grief that feels larger than its cause. And we say it came out of nowhere. It didn't. The soul has been signaling for a long time. But because its environment is invisible, its distress is misunderstood. We rarely ask, what kind of inner atmosphere am I living in? Instead, we ask, why can't I handle this better? The body cannot adapt indefinitely to low oxygen. Eventually, systems fail. The same is true emotionally and spiritually. This chapter names the problem not to diagnose you, but to relieve you of misplaced blame. You are not weak for feeling this way. You are not ungrateful. You are not failing at life. You may simply be trying to live without enough air. Modern life often strips away the very elements the soul requires to breathe: stillness, connection, purpose, truth, compassion. In their absence, we inhale noise. We exhale urgency. We exist in constant alert. And the nervous system interprets this as danger, even when nothing is wrong. Suffocation creates fear. Fear creates more suffocation. It becomes a cycle. But cycles can be interrupted, not by effort, but by restoration. The goal is not to eliminate stress. It is to reintroduce oxygen, to notice what calms you beneath thought, to allow space without filling it, to reconnect with meaning beyond outcome, to remember that your worth is not measured by endurance. Suffocation ends when the environment changes. This chapter does not offer solutions yet. It offers clarity. What you are feeling is not a mystery. It is the body and soul doing what they were designed to do when deprived of what they need most. They ask for air. Chapter 6. The false environments we try to live in. Humans are adaptable enough to survive almost anywhere. That ability has helped us build cities, cross oceans, and endure hardship. But adaptation has a shadow side. We can learn to live in environments that slowly harm us and call it normal. Not every environment that sustains activity sustains life. Some environments keep us moving while quietly draining what makes movement meaningful. These are the false environments. They are not physical places. They are psychological and spiritual climates we inhabit every day, often without realizing we've moved in. One of the most common is constant productivity. In this environment, worth is measured by output. Rest feels suspicious. Stillness feels lazy. Life becomes a series of tasks to be completed rather than moments to be lived. Even joy is optimized. Even healing becomes another project. The soul cannot breathe here. Productivity is useful, but it is not an atmosphere. It does not hold you. It only demands. Another false environment is fear-based thinking. Here, the mind scans endlessly for threats, failure, rejection, loss, uncertainty. The body stays alert. The nervous system never stands down. Even in safety, there is no felt safety. Fear sharpens attention, but it corrodes peace. It was meant to be a signal, not a habitat. Then there is ego and comparison. This environment measures the self against others constantly. It asks, am I ahead? Am I behind? Am I enough? Identity becomes fragile because it depends on external reference points that never stabilize. Comparison offers motivation at first. Over time, it offers only hunger. Control and certainty form another false climate. In this environment, unpredictability feels intolerable. Ambiguity feels like danger. The need to know, plan, and manage becomes relentless. Life shrinks to what can be guaranteed. But the soul expands in trust, not control. These environments are seductive because they reward survival. They produce results. They earn praise. They create the appearance of strength. But they do not nourish. Living in them is like surviving on processed air, enough to keep you functioning, not enough to make you well. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives inside these false environments without ever realizing they've left their natural one. They feel restless, but assume restlessness is ambition. They feel empty, but assume emptiness is the price of success. They learn to confuse pressure with purpose. False environments train the soul to hold its breath. They keep attention external. They replace presence with performance. They reward disconnection as efficiency. And because these climates are socially reinforced, leaving them can feel irresponsible or even dangerous. Slowing down feels like falling behind. Letting go of fear feels naive. Releasing control feels reckless. So we stay, not because we are thriving, but because we have adapted. But adaptation is not alignment. You can adapt to noise and forget what silence feels like. You can adapt to tension and forget what ease feels like. You can adapt to shallow breathing and forget what fullness feels like. This chapter is not an indictment of modern life. These environments arise from real needs: safety, progress, order, belonging. But when they become total climates rather than tools, they turn hostile to the soul. Tools are meant to be used and set down. False environments do not let you set them down. The cost is not always visible at first. It shows up gradually, in impatience, in cynicism, in a quiet grief that follows success instead of fulfillment. The soul is not dramatic when it is deprived. It is patient. It waits. It adapts. Until it can't. Recognizing false environments is not about rejecting the world. It is about remembering that survival conditions are not the same as living conditions. You were not meant to live inside pressure. You were meant to pass through it. With breath intact. Chapter 7. Spiritual tools are life support. When a diver straps on an oxygen tank, no one accuses them of weakness. No one says, "You should be able to breathe on your own by now." No one suggests they rely less on equipment and more on inner strength. The tank is not a belief. It is not a philosophy. It is life support. Spiritual tools function the same way. Stillness, prayer, reflection, compassion, presence. These are not personality traits or moral achievements. They are not rewards for being good or enlightened. They are supports for environments that would otherwise overwhelm the human nervous system and spirit. But many people misunderstand them. They treat spiritual practices as opinions, as preferences, as optional add-ons for people who have extra time or unusual inclinations. Or worse, they treat them as proof of inadequacy, something you turn to only when you're failing. This misunderstanding keeps people exposed. You do not wait until you're drowning to put on scuba gear. You put it on before entering the water. Spiritual tools are not solutions to crises. They are protections against depletion. Stillness is not doing nothing. It is allowing the nervous system to reset in an environment that never stops demanding attention. It is oxygen for a mind suffocating on constant input. Prayer or reflection is not about asking for favors or fixing reality. It is about orientation, remembering that you are not the center of everything you carry. It redistributes weight. Compassion is not sentimentality. It is insulation. It keeps the harshness of the world from hardening the heart beyond recognition. Presence is not passivity. It is stabilization. It prevents the mind from living exclusively in imagined futures or unresolved pasts, both of which steal air from the present moment. These tools do not remove you from life. They make life breathable. The resistance to spiritual tools often sounds reasonable. I don't have time. I'm not consistent. I don't do it right. I should be able to handle things without this. But again, no astronaut argues with vacuum. Modern environments expose us to more pressure, speed, and uncertainty than at any other point in human history. Pretending we can move through this without support is not strength. It is denial. The most advanced missions require the most sophisticated life support systems. Spiritual tools are not about escaping reality. They are about surviving it intact. And like all equipment, they work through use, not belief. Oxygen works whether or not you understand it. Stillness works whether or not you perfect it. A few minutes of quiet can do more than hours of analysis. A moment of presence can interrupt a spiral that no amount of thinking resolves. These tools are not meant to be impressive. They are meant to be reliable. The mistake many people make is trying to turn spiritual practices into achievements. They try to master them, optimize them, judge themselves by them. But equipment is not something you win. It is something you rely on. Reliance is not failure. It is wisdom. This chapter is not prescribing rituals. It is reframing function. If you feel exposed, overwhelmed, or depleted, it does not mean you need to become more disciplined. It means you need protection. Protection does not isolate you from life. It allows you to engage without losing yourself. The soul was never meant to operate without support. Spiritual tools are not about becoming better. They are about staying alive, in places where you were never meant to breathe unassisted. Chapter 8. Remembering where we belong. Most of what we call spiritual seeking is actually forgetting. We search for answers, practices, identities, and breakthroughs as though something essential is missing, as though we must acquire what we lack or become someone we are not. But what if awakening is not a process of becoming? What if it is a process of remembering? No fish needs to be taught how to belong in water. No bird studies flight manuals to understand the sky. Belonging precedes understanding. Alignment comes before explanation. In the same way, The soul does not need to be constructed. It needs to be recalled. There is an inner knowing beneath thought, a quiet recognition that life makes sense at a level deeper than logic. You may have felt it in moments of stillness, beauty, grief, or love. Times when effort fell away and something softer, truer, emerged. Those moments were not achievements. They were homecomings. Modern life pulls us outward. It trains attention to live in noise, comparison, urgency, and abstraction. Over time, we forget the texture of our own inner world. We forget what it feels like to rest without justification, to exist without performing. This forgetting is not a failure. It is a consequence of immersion. Just as a fish does not notice water, humans immersed in constant stimulation stop noticing what sustains them. Memory fades, not because the truth disappears, but because attention is elsewhere. Spiritual memory is not about recalling facts. It is about recognizing familiarity. When you slow down enough, something in you relaxes, not because conditions have improved, but because alignment is returning. The breath deepens. The body softens. The mind loosens its grip. This is not learning. It is remembering. And remembering does not require effort. It requires permission. Permission to stop striving. Permission to not know. Permission to let go of the identity built around survival. Many people resist remembering because it feels like loss. Letting go of constant control can feel like falling. Releasing fear can feel irresponsible. Stepping out of false environments can feel like abandoning protection, even when those environments were the source of harm. But true belonging does not demand vigilance. It allows rest. The soul's environment is not somewhere you travel to. It is something you return to again and again, often for brief moments at first. A pause between thoughts. A breath taken fully. A moment of presence that does not need explanation. These moments accumulate, not as progress, but as familiarity. You begin to recognize when you are aligned and when you are not. Not through judgment, but through sensation. Tightness versus ease. Noise versus clarity. Shallow breath versus full. Memory teaches without force. This chapter is not urging you to abandon the world or adopt a new identity. It is inviting you to notice what feels like relief rather than stimulation. What feels grounding rather than impressive. Remembering where you belong does not make you passive. It makes you oriented. From orientation comes discernment. From discernment comes choice. From choice comes a life that no longer feels like an argument with itself. You have not lost what you were seeking. You have simply been away from it, immersed in environments that demanded forgetting. And every time you pause long enough to feel your own breath, your own presence, your own inner quiet, something ancient stirs. Not because you are discovering something new, but because you are remembering what has always known you. Chapter 9. Living in the world without losing the soul. Leaving the world is not the answer. You do not need to retreat to a mountain, abandon responsibility, or insulate yourself from reality to live a spiritually aligned life. Fish still swim through currents. Birds still navigate storms. Astronauts still work in the vacuum of space. They simply do not confuse movement with exposure. The challenge is not that the world is harsh. The challenge is learning how to move through it without letting it define the inner atmosphere you breathe. An astronaut does not become space. A diver does not become the ocean. They enter, operate, and return, protected by what sustains them. Humans often forget this boundary. We absorb urgency as identity. We internalize pressure as truth. We let external systems write internal rules. And slowly, the soul disappears behind roles, demands, and expectations. Living in the world without losing the soul requires discernment rather than withdrawal. It means recognizing which environments shape you and choosing how close you allow them to get. You cannot control the weather of the world, but you can maintain the climate within. This does not mean emotional detachment or indifference. It means anchoring, knowing where you return when the noise becomes too loud. A suit does not eliminate sensation. It filters it. It allows information in without letting harm through. Spiritual alignment works the same way. You still care. You still act. You still feel. But you are no longer raw. You learn when to engage and when to step back, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to push and when to rest. These choices come not from fear, but from orientation. The soul, when protected, becomes resilient rather than brittle. One of the great misconceptions is that presence makes you less effective. In truth, it makes you clearer, less reactive, more precise. When you are not internally suffocating, you respond rather than explode. You can exist in systems that value speed without becoming frantic. You can face uncertainty without panic. You can experience conflict without losing compassion. This is not superiority. It is stability. Living this way requires ongoing maintenance. Suits must be checked. Tanks must be refilled. Alignment is not a permanent state. It is a relationship. One you return to daily, sometimes hourly. You will forget. You will drift. You will re-enter false environments without noticing. That is not failure. Returning is the practice. The soul does not demand perfection. It asks for remembrance. When alignment becomes familiar, you begin to sense when something is off, not as guilt, but as information. The breath shortens. The body tightens. The mind accelerates. These are cues, not condemnations. They remind you to come back. Living in the world without losing the soul means refusing to let pressure become your home. It means participating fully while staying inwardly grounded. It means knowing that no role, outcome, or system is more important than the environment that keeps you alive from the inside. You are not meant to disappear into the world. You are meant to move through it, breathing your own air, carrying your own center, and returning to yourself as often as necessary. Because survival is not the goal. Wholeness is. Chapter 10, Breathing Again. There is a moment when breathing becomes noticeable again, not because it is difficult, but because it is full. The chest expands without resistance. The body softens instead of bracing. The mind quiets not through force, but through relief. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing needs to be fixed. And yet, everything feels different. This is what alignment feels like. Not excitement, not constant happiness, but a deep, underlying sense of okayness. Peace, in its natural form, is not the absence of problems. It is the absence of suffocation. It is what remains when the soul is finally in an environment where it can breathe. For many people, this feeling arrives unexpectedly. In stillness, in nature, in moments of honest connection, in grief that opens rather than closes, in silence that feels spacious instead of empty. When it comes, it feels familiar, not because it is new, but because it is remembered. Breathing again does not mean life becomes easy. The world does not slow down to accommodate your alignment. Responsibilities remain. Loss still occurs. Uncertainty continues. But something essential has shifted. You are no longer fighting for air. From this place, action feels cleaner. Decisions feel less frantic. Effort arises from clarity rather than fear. You move because it is time to move, not because you are running from stillness. This is what it means to live from the inside out. Instead of trying to manage the outer world to create inner peace, you tend to the inner environment and let your actions emerge from there. You respond rather than react. You engage without losing yourself. Breathing again also changes how you relate to others. When you are no longer starved for meaning or safety, you stop asking people to supply what only alignment can provide. Relationships become places of meeting rather than rescue. Compassion flows more easily, not because you are trying to be good, but because you are no longer constricted. This is not an ending. It is a beginning. Alignment is not something you achieve once and keep forever. You will re-enter noisy environments. You will forget to protect your inner climate. You will feel tight again. And when you do, you will know what is happening. You will recognize the sensation of shallow breath, not as failure, but as information. A reminder to return. A signal to restore what sustains you. The core truth of this book is simple, and it bears repeating. Humans do not struggle because life is hard. They struggle because they are trying to breathe in the wrong environment. When you remember where you belong, struggle changes shape. It becomes temporary rather than defining. It becomes something you move through rather than something you live inside. Breathing again does not make you separate from the world. It allows you to be fully here, without being consumed. And perhaps that is the quiet hope beneath every spiritual longing. Not to escape life, not to transcend being human, but to finally live in an environment where the soul can breathe, where peace is not manufactured, and where wholeness feels like the most natural state of all.